chapter 25, postscript. In behalf of the dignity of whaling, I would fain advance not but substantiated facts. But after embattling his facts, an advocate who would wholly suppress a not unreasonable surmise, which might tell eloquently upon that cause, such as an advocate, would he not be blameworthy? It is well known that at the coronation of kings and queens, even modern ones, a certain curious process of seasoning them for their functions has gone through. There is a salt cellar of state, so-called, and there may be a caster of state. How they use the salt precisely, who knows? Certain I am, however, that a king's head is solemnly oiled at his coronation, even as a head of salad. Can it be, though, that they anoint it with a view of making its interior run well as they anoint machinery? Much might be ruminated here concerning the essential dignity of this regal process, because in common life we esteem but meanly and contemptibly a fellow who anoints his hair and palpably smells of that anointing. In truth, a mature man who uses hair oil, unless medicinally, that man has probably got a quaggy spot in him somewhere. As a general rule, he can't amount to much in his totality. But the only thing to be considered here is this: what kind of oil is used at coronations? Certainly it cannot be olive oil, nor macassar oil, nor castor oil, nor bear's oil, nor train oil, nor cod liver oil. What then can it possibly be but the sperm oil in its unmanufactured, unpolluted state, the sweetest of all oils? Think of that, ye loyal Britons. We whalemen supply your kings and queens with coronation stuff. Chapter 26, Knights and Squires. The chief mate of the Pequod was Starbuck, a native of Nantucket and a Quaker by descent. He was a long, earnest man, and though born on an icy coast, seemed well adapted to endure hot latitudes, his flesh being hard as twice-baked biscuit. Transported to the Indies, his live blood would not spoil like bottled ale. He must have been born in some time of general drought and famine, or upon one of those fast days for which his state is famous. Only some 30 arid summers had he seen. Those summers had dried up all his physical superfluousness. But this, his thinness, so to speak, seemed no more the token of wasting anxieties and cares than it seemed the indication of any bodily blight. It was merely the condensation of the man. He was by no means ill-looking, quite the contrary. His pure, tight skin was an excellent fit, and closely wrapped up in it and embalmed with inner health and strength, like a revivified Egyptian, this Starbuck seemed prepared to endure for long ages to come, and to endure always, as now. For be it polar snow or torrid sun, like a patent chronometer, his interior vitality was warranted to do well in all climates. Looking into his eyes, you seemed to see there the yet lingering images of those thousandfold perils he had calmly confronted through life. A staid, steadfast man, whose life for the most part was a telling pantomime of action, and not a tame chapter of sounds. Yet for all his hardy sobriety and fortitude, there were certain qualities in him which at times affected and in some cases seemed well nigh to overbalance all the rest. Uncommon conscientious for a seaman, and endued with a deep natural reverence, the wild, watery loneliness of his life did therefore strongly incline him to superstition, but to that sort of superstition which in some organization seems rather to spring somehow from intelligence rather than from ignorance. Outward portents and inward presentiments were his. And if at times these things bent the welded iron of his soul, much more did his faraway domestic memories of his young Cape wife and child tend to bend him still more from the original ruggedness of his nature, and open him still further to those latent influences which, in some honest-hearted men, restrain the gush of daredevil daring, so often evinced by others in the more perilous vicissitudes of the fishery. "I will have no man in my boat," said Starbuck, "who is not afraid of a whale." By this, he seemed to mean not only that the most reliable and useful courage was that which arises from the fair estimation of the encountered peril, but that an utterly fearless man is a far more dangerous comrade than a coward. "Aye, aye," said Stubb, the second mate. "Starbuck there is as careful a man as you'll find anywhere in this fishery." But we shall ere long see what that word careful precisely means when used by a man like Stubb or almost any other whale hunter. Starbuck was no crusader after perils. In him, courage was not a sentiment, but a thing simply useful to him and always at hand upon all mortally practical occasions. Besides, he thought, perhaps that in this business of whaling, courage was one of the great staple outfits of the ship, like her beef and her bread, and not to be foolishly wasted. Wherefore, he had no fancy for lowering the whales after sundown, nor for persisting in fighting a fish that too much persisted in fighting him. For thought Starbuck, "I am here in this critical ocean to kill whales for my living, and not to be killed by them for theirs." And that hundreds of men had been so killed, Starbuck well knew. What doom was his own father's? Where, in the bottomless deeps, could he find the torn limbs of his brother? With memories like these in him, and moreover given to a certain superstitiousness, as has been said, the courage of this Starbuck, which could nevertheless still flourish, must indeed have been extreme. But it was not in reasonable nature that a man so organized, and with such terrible experiences and remembrances as he had, it was not in nature that these things should fail in latently engendering an element in him which, under suitable circumstances, would break out from its confinement and burn all his courage up. And brave as he might be, it was that sort of bravery chiefly visible in some intrepid man, which, while generally abiding firm in the conflict with seas or winds or whales or any of the ordinary irrational horrors of the world, yet cannot withstand those more terrific because more spiritual terrors, which sometimes menace you from the concentrating brow of an enraged and mighty man.
But were the coming narrative to reveal, in any instance, the complete abasement of poor Starbuck's fortitude, scarce might I have the heart to write it, for it is a thing most sorrowful, nay shocking, to expose the fall of valor in the soul. Men may seem detestable as joint stock companies and nations. Knaves, fools, and murderers there may be. Men may have mean and meager faces, but man in the ideal is so noble and so sparkling, such a grand and glowing creature, that over any ignominious blemish in him, all his fellows should run to throw their costliest robes. That immaculate manliness we feel within ourselves, so far within us that it remains intact, though all the outer character seem gone, bleeds with the keenest anguish at the undraped spectacle of a valor-ruined man. Nor can piety itself, at such a shameful sight, completely stifle her upbraidings against the permitting stars. But this august dignity I treat of is not the dignity of kings and robes, but that abounding dignity which has no robed investiture. Thou shalt see it shining in the arm that wields a pick or drives a spike, that democratic dignity which, on all hands, radiates without end from God himself, the great God absolute, the center and circumference of all democracy, his omnipresence, our divine equality. If then to meanest mariners and renegades and castaways I shall hereafter ascribe high qualities, though dark, weave round them tragic graces, if even the most mournful, perchance the most abased among them all, shall at times lift himself to the exalted mounts. If I shall touch that workman's arm with some ethereal light, if I shall spread a rainbow over his disastrous set of sun, then against all mortal critics bear me out in it, thou just spirit of equality, which has spread one royal mantle of humanity over all my kind. Bear me out in it, thou great democratic God, who didst not refuse to the swart convict, Bunyan, the pale poetic pearl. Thou didst clothe with doubly hammered leaves of finest gold the stumped and paupered arm of old Cervantes, thou who didst pick up Andrew Jackson from the pebbles, who didst hurl him upon a war horse, who didst thunder him higher than a throne, thou who, in all thy mighty earthly marchlings, ever cullest thy selectest champions from the kingly commons. Bear me out in it, O God. Chapter 27, Knights and Squires. Stubb was the second mate. He was a native of Cape Cod, and hence, according to local usage, was called a Cape Cod man. A happy-go-lucky, neither craven nor valiant, taking perils as they came with an indifferent air, and while engaged in the most imminent crisis of the chase, toiling away, calm and collected as a journeyman joiner engaged for the year. Good-humored, easy, and careless, he presided over his whaleboat as the most deadly encounter were but a dinner, and his crew all invited guests. He was as particular about the comfortable arrangements of his part of the boat as an old stage driver is about the snugness of his box. When close to the whale, in the very deathlock of the fight, he handled his unpitying lance coolly and offhandedly, as a whistling tinker his hammer. He would hum over his rigading tunes while flank and flank with the most exasperated monster. Long usage had, for this Stubb, converted the jaws of death into an easy chair. What he thought of death itself, there is no telling. Whether he ever thought of it at all might be a question. But if he ever did chance to cast his mind that way, after a comfortable dinner, no doubt, like a good sailor, he took it to be a sort of call of the watch to tumble aloft and bestir themselves there about something which he would find out when he obeyed the order, and not sooner. What perhaps, with other things, made Stubb such an easygoing, unfearing man, so cheerily trudging off with the burden of life in a world full of grave peddlers, all bowed to the ground with their packs? What helped to bring about that almost imperious good humor of his? That thing must have been his pipe. For like his nose, his short black little pipe was one of the regular features of his face. You would almost as soon have expected him to turn out of his bunk without his nose as without his pipe. He kept a whole row of pipes there, ready loaded, stuck in a rack within easy reach of his hand. And whenever he turned in, he smoked them all out of succession, lighting one from the other to the end of the chapter, then loading them again to be in readiness anew. For when Stubb dressed, instead of first putting his legs into his trousers, he put his pipe into his mouth. I say this continual smoking must have been one cause, at least, of his peculiar disposition, for everyone knows that this earthly air, whether ashore or afloat, is terribly infected with the nameless miseries of the numberless mortals who have died exhaling it. And as in time of the cholera, some people go about with a camphorated handkerchief to their mouths. So likewise, against all mortal tribulations, Stubb's tobacco smoke might have operated as a sort of disinfecting agent. The third mate was Flask, a native of Tisbury in Martha's Vineyard, a short, stout, ruddy young fellow, very pugnacious concerning whales, who somehow seemed to think that the great leviathans had personally and hereditarily affronted him, and therefore it was a sort of point of honor with him to destroy them whenever encountered. So utterly lost was he to all sense of reverence for the many marvels of their majestic bulk and mystic ways, and so dead to anything like an apprehension of any possible danger from encountering them, that in his poor opinion, the wondrous whale was but a species of magnified mouse, or at least water rat, requiring only a little circumvention and some small application of time and trouble in order to kill and boil. This ignorant, unconscious fearlessness of his made him a little waggish in the matter of whales. He followed these fish for the fun of it, and a 3 years' voyage round Cape Horn was only a jolly joke that lasted that length of time. As a carpenter's nails are divided into wrought nails and cut nails, so mankind may similarly be divided. Little Flask was one of the wrought ones, made to clinch tight and last long. They called him King Post on board of the Pequod, because in form he could be well likened to the short, square timber known by that name in Arctic whalers, and which, by means of many radiating side timbers inserted into it, serves to brace the ship against icy concussions of those battering seas. Now, these three mates, Starbuck, Stubb, and Flask, were momentous men. They it was who, by universal prescription, commanded 3 of the Pequod's boats as headsmen. In that grand order of battle in which Captain Ahab would presently marshal his forces to descend on the whales, these 3 headsmen were as captains of companies. Or, being armed with their long, keen whaling spears, they were as a picked trio of lancers, even as the harpooners were flingers of javelins.
And since in this famous fishery, each mate or headsman, like a Gothic knight of old, is always accompanied by his boat steerer or harpooner, who in certain conjunctures provides him with a fresh lance, when the former one has been badly twisted or elbowed in the assault. And moreover, as there generally subsists between the two a close intimacy and friendliness, it is therefore but meet that in this place we set down who the Pequod's harpooners were and to what headsman each of them belonged. First of all was Queequeg, whom Starbuck, the chief mate, had selected for his squire. But Queequeg is already known. Next was Tashtego, an unmixed Indian from Gay Head, the most westerly promontory of Martha's Vineyard, where there still exists the last remnant of a village of red men, which has long supplied the neighboring island of Nantucket with many of her most daring harpooneers. In the fishery, they usually go by the generic name of gayheaders. Tashtego's long, lean, sable hair, his high cheekbones, his black, rounding eyes, for an Indian, oriental in their largeness, but Antarctic in their glittering expression. All this sufficiently proclaimed him an inheritor of the unvitiated blood of those proud warrior hunters who, in quest of the great New England moose, had scoured, bow in hand, the aboriginal forests of the Maine. But no longer snuffing in the trail of wild beasts of the woodland, Tashtigo now hunted in the wake of the great whales of the sea, the unerring harpoon of the sun, fitly replacing the infallible arrow of the sires. To look at the tawny brown of his lithe, snaky limbs, you would have almost credited the superstitions of some of the earlier Puritans, and half believed this wild Indian to be a son of the prince of the powers of the air. Tashtigo was Stubb, the second mate's squire. Third among the harpooneers was Daggoo, a gigantic coal-black Negro savage with a lion-like tread, an Ahasuerus to behold. Suspended from his ears were two golden hoops so large that the sailors called them ring bolts and would talk of securing the topsail halyards to them. In his youth, Daggoo had voluntarily shipped on board of a whaler lying in a lonely bay on his native coast. And never having been anywhere in the world but in Africa, Nantucket and the pagan harbors most frequented by the whalemen, and having now led for many years the bold life of the fishery in the ships of owners uncommonly heedful of what manner of men they shipped, Daggoo retained all his barbaric virtues, and erect as a giraffe, moved about the decks in all the pomp of 6'5" in his socks. There was a corporeal humility in looking up at him, and a white man standing before him seemed a white flag come to beg truce of a fortress. Curious to tell, this imperial Negro, Ahasuerus Daggoo, was the squire of Little Flask, who looked like a chessman beside him. As for the residue of the Pequod's company, be it said that at the present day, not one in two of the many thousand men before the mast employed in the American whale fishery are Americans born, though pretty nearly all the officers are. Herein is the same with the American whale fishery as with the American Army and military and merchant navies, and the engineering forces employed in the construction of the American canals and railroads. The same, I say, because in all these cases, the Native American liberally provides the brains, the rest of the world has generously supplying the muscles. No small number of these whaling seamen belong to the Azores, where the outward-bound Nantucket whalers frequently touch to augment their crews from the hardy peasants of those rocky shores. In like manner, the Greenland whalers sailing out of Hull or London put in at the Shetland Islands to receive the full complement of their crew. Upon the passage homewards, they drop them there again. How it is, there is no telling, but islanders seem to make the best whalemen. They were nearly all islanders in the Pequod, isolados too. I call such, not acknowledging the common continent of men, but each isolado living on a separate continent of his own. Yet now, federated along one keel, what a set these isolados were, and an anarchist Klutz deputation from all the isles of the sea and all the ends of the earth, accompanying old Ahab in the Pequod to lay the world's grievances before the bar from which not very many of them ever come back. Black little Pip, he never did. Oh no, he went before. Poor Alabama boy. On the grim Pequod's forecastle, ye shall ere long see him, beating his tambourine, prelusive of eternal time. When sent for to the great quarterdeck on high, he was bid strike in with the angels, and beat his tambourine in glory, called a coward here, hailed a hero there.
Chapter 28, Ahab. For several days after leaving Nantucket, nothing above hatches was seen of Captain Ahab. The mates regularly relieved each other at the watches, and for aught that could be seen to the contrary, they seemed to be the only commanders of the ship. Only they sometimes issued from the cabin with orders so sudden and peremptory that after all it was plain they were commanded vicariously. Yes, their supreme lord and dictator was there, though hitherto unseen by any eyes not permitted to penetrate into the now sacred retreat of the cabin. Every time I ascended to the deck from my watches below, I instantly gazed aft to mark if any strange faces were visible, for my first vague disquietude touching the unknown captain, now in the seclusion of the sea, became almost a perturbation. This was strangely heightened at times by the ragged Elijah's diabolical incoherences uninvitedly recurring to me with a subtle energy I could not have before conceived of. But poorly could I have withstood them, much as in other moods I was almost ready to smile at the solemn whimsicalness of that outlandish prophet of the wharves. But whatever it was of apprehensiveness or uneasiness, to call it so, which I felt, yet whenever I came to look about me on the ship, it seemed against all warranty to cherish such emotions. For though the harpooners, with the great body of the crew, were far more barbaric, heathenish, and motely set than any of the tame merchant ship companies which my previous experiences had made me acquainted with, still I ascribed this, and rightly ascribed it, to the fierce uniqueness of the very nature of that wild Scandinavian vocation in which I had so abandonedly embarked. But it was especially the aspect of the three chief officers of the ship, the mates, which was most forcibly calculated to allay those colorless misgivings and induce confidence and cheerfulness in every presentment of the voyage. Three better, more likely sea officers and men, each in his own different way, could not readily be found, and they were every one of them Americans, a Nantucketeer, a vineyarder, a Cape man. Now, it being Christmas when the ship shot out from her harbor, for a space we had biting polar weather, though all the time running away from it to the southward. And by every degree and minute of latitude which we sailed, gradually leaving that merciless winter and all its intolerable weather behind us, it was one of those less lowering, but still gray and gloomy enough mornings of the transition, when with a fair wind the ship was rushing through the water with a vindictive sort of leaping and melancholy rapidity that, as I mounted to the deck at the call of the forenoon watch, so soon as I leveled my glance toward the taffrail, foreboding shivers ran over me. Reality outran apprehension. Captain Ahab stood upon the quarterdeck.
There seemed no sign of common bodily illness about him, nor of the recovery from any. He looked like a man cut away from the stake when the fire has overrunningly wasted all the limbs without consuming them, or taking away one particle from their compacted, aged robustness. His whole high, broad form seemed made of solid bronze and shaped in an unalterable mold, like Cellini's cast Perseus, threading its way out from among his gray hairs and continuing right down one side of his tawny, scorched face and neck till it disappeared in his clothing. You saw a slender, rod-like mark, lividly whitish. It resembled that perpendicular seam sometimes made in the straight, lofty trunk of a great tree, when the upper lightning tearingly darts down it and without wrenching a single twig, peels and grooves out the bark from top to bottom ere turning off into the soil, leaving the tree still greenly alive but branded. Whether that mark was born with him, or whether it was the scar left by some desperate wound, no one could certainly say. By some tacit consent throughout the voyage, little or no allusion was made to it, especially by the mates. But once Tashtego Sr., an old gay-head Indian among the crew, superstitiously asserted that not till he was full 40 years old did Ahab become that way branded. And then it came upon him not in the fury of any mortal fray, but in an elemental strife at sea. Yet this wild hint seemed inferentially negatived by what a gray Manxman insinuated, an old sepulchral man who, having never before sailed out of Nantucket, had never ere this laid eyes upon wild Ahab. Nevertheless, the old sea traditions, the immemorial credulities, popularly invested this old Manxman with preternatural powers of discernment, so that no white sailor seriously contradicted him when he said that if ever Captain Ahab should be tranquilly laid out, which might hardly come to pass, so he muttered, then whoever should do that last office for the dead would find a birthmark on him from crown to sole. So powerfully did this whole grim aspect of Ahab affect me, and the livid brand which streaked it, that for the first few moments I hardly noted that not a little of this overwhelming grimness was owing to the barbaric white leg upon which he partly stood. It had previously come to me that this ivory leg had at sea been fashioned from the polished bone of the sperm whale's jaw. Aye, he was dismasted off Japan, said the old gay-head Indian once, but like his dismasted craft, he shipped another mast without coming home for it. He has a quiver of 'em. I was struck with the singular posture he maintained. Upon each side of the Pequod's quarterdeck, and pretty close to the mizzen shrouds, there was an auger hole, bored about half an inch or so into the plank. His bone legs steadied in that hole, one arm elevated and holding by a shroud. Captain Ahab stood erect, looking straight out beyond the ship's ever-pitching prow. There was an infinity of firmest fortitude, a determinate, unsurrenderable willfulness in the fixed and fearless forward dedication of that glance. Not a word he spoke, nor did his officers say aught to him, though by all their minutest gestures and expressions they plainly showed the uneasy, if not painful, consciousness of being under a troubled master eye. And not only that, but moody, stricken Ahab stood before them with a crucifixion in his face, in all the nameless, regal, overbearing dignity of some mighty woe. Ere long, from his first visit in the air, he withdrew into his cabin. But after that morning, he was every day visible to the crew, either standing in his pivot hole or seated upon an ivory stool he had, or heavily walking the deck. As the sky grew less gloomy, indeed began to grow a little genial, he became still less and less a recluse, as if, when the ship had sailed from home, nothing but the dead wintry bleakness of the sea had then kept him so secluded. And by it came to pass that he was almost continually in the air. But as yet, for all he said, or perceptibly did, on the at last sunny deck, he seemed as unnecessary there as another mast. But the Pequod was only making a passage now, not regularly cruising. Nearly all whaling preparations needing supervision the mates were fully competent to, so that there was little or nothing out of himself to employ or excite Ahab now, and thus chase away for that one interval the clouds that layer upon layer were piled upon his brow, as ever all clouds choose the loftiest peak to pile themselves upon. Nevertheless, ere long, the warm, warbling persuasiveness of the pleasant holiday weather we came to seemed gradually to charm him from his mood. For as when the red-cheeked dancing girls, April and May, trip home to the wintry misanthropic woods, even the barest, ruggedest, most thunder-cloven old oak will at least send forth some few green sprouts to welcome such glad-hearted visitants. So Ahab did, in the end, a little respond to the playful allurings of that girlish air. More than once did he put forth the faint blossom of a look, which, in any other man, would have soon flowered out in a smile. Chapter 29, enter Ahab. To him, Stubb. Some days elapsed, and ice and icebergs all astern, the Pequod went rollingly through the bright Quito spring, which at sea almost perpetually reigns on the threshold of the eternal August of the tropic. The warmly cool, clear, ringing, perfumed, overflowing, redundant days were as crystal goblets of Persian sherbet, heaped up, flaked up with rose-water snow. The starred and stately nights seemed haughty dames in jeweled velvets, nursing at home in lonely pride the memory of their absent conquering earls, the golden helmeted sons. For sleeping man, 'twas hard to choose between such winsome days and such seducing nights. But all the witcheries of the unwaning weather did not merely lend new spells and potencies to the outward world. Inward, they turned upon the soul, especially when the still mild hours of eve came on. Then memory shot her crystals as the clear ice most forms of noiseless twilights. And all these subtle agencies, more and more, they wrought on Ahab's texture. Old age is always wakeful, as if the longer linked with life, the less man has to do with aught that looks like death. Among sea commanders, the old graybirds will oftenest leave their berths to visit the night-cloaked deck. It was so with Ahab, only that now, of late, he seems so much to live in the open air that, truly speaking, his visits were more to the cabin than from the cabin to the planks. It feels like going down into one's tomb, he would mutter to himself, for an old captain like me to be descending this narrow scuttle to go to my grave-dug berth. So, almost every 24 hours, when the watches of the night were set, and the band on deck sentineled the slumbers of the band below, and when, if a rope was to be hauled upon the forecastle, the sailors flung it not rudely down, as by day, but with some cautiousness dropped it to its place, for fear of disturbing their slumbering shipmates. When this sort of steady quietude would begin to prevail, habitually the silent steersman would watch the cabin scuttle, and ere long the old man would emerge, gripping at the iron banister to help his crippled way. Some considering touch of humanity was in him, for at times like these he usually abstained from patrolling the quarterdeck, because to his wearied mates seeking repose within 6 inches of his ivory heel, such would have been the reverberating crack and din of that bony step that their dreams would have been of the crunching teeth of sharks. But once the mood was on him too deep for common regardings, and as with heavy lumber-like pace he was measuring the ship from taffrail to mainmast, Stubb, the odd second mate, came up from below, and with a certain unassured, deprecating humorousness, hinted that if Captain Ahab was pleased to walk the planks, then no one could say nay, but there might be some way of muffling the noise, hinting something indistinctly and hesitatingly about a globe of tow, and the insertion into it of the ivory heel. Ah, Stubb, thou didst not know Ahab then.
Am I a cannonball, Stubb, said Ahab, that thou wouldst wad me with that fashion? But go thy ways, I had forgot, below to thy nightly grave, where such as ye sleep between shrouds, to use ye to the filling one at last, down, dog, and kennel. Starting at the unforeseen concluding exclamation of the so suddenly scornful man, Stubb was speechless a moment, then said excitedly, I am not used to be spoken to that way, sir. I do but less than half like it, sir. Avast, gritted Ahab between his set teeth, and violently moving away as if to avert some passionate temptation. No, sir, not yet, said Stubb, emboldened. I will not tamely be called a dog, sir. Then be called 10 times a donkey and a mule and an ass, and be gone, or I'll clear the world of thee. As he said this, Ahab advanced upon him with such overbearing terrors in his aspect that Stubb involuntarily retreated. I was never served so before without giving a hard blow for it, muttered Stubb, as he found himself descending the cabin scuttle. It's very queer. Stop, Stubb. Somehow, now, I don't know, well, whether to go back and strike him, or, what's that, down here on my knees and pray for him? Yes, that was the thought coming up in me, but it would be the first time I ever did pray. It's queer, very queer, and he's queer too. I take him fore and aft. He's about the queerest old man Stubb ever sailed with. How he flashed at me, his eyes like powder pans. Is he mad? Anyway, there's something on his mind, as sure as there must be something on a deck when it cracks. He ain't in his bed now either, more than 3 hours out of the 24, and he don't sleep then. Didn't that doughboy, the steward, tell me that of a morning he always finds the old man's hammock clothes all rumpled and tumbled, and the sheets down at the foot, and the coverlid almost tied in knots, and the pillow a sort of frightful hot, as though a baked brick had been on it? A hot old man. I guess he's got what some folks ashore call a conscience. It's a toothache. Well then, I don't know what it is, but the Lord keeps me from catching it. He's full of riddles. I wonder what he goes into the afterhold for every night, as Doughboy tells me he supposes. What that's for, I should like to know. Who's made appointments with him in the hold? Ain't that queer now? But there's no tellin'. It's the old game. He goes for a snooze. Damn me, it's worth a fellow's while to be born into the world, if only to fall right asleep. And now that I think of it, that's about the first thing babies do, and that's a sort of queer too. Damn me, but all things are queer, come to think of 'em. But that's against my principles. Think not, it's my 11th commandment. And sleep when you can is my 12th, so here goes again. But how's that? Didn't he call me a dog? Blazes, he called me 10 times a donkey and piled a lot of jackasses on top of that. He might as well have kicked me and done with it. Maybe he did kick me and I didn't observe it. I was so taken aback with his brow somehow. It flashed like a bleached bone. What the devil's the matter with me? I don't stand right on my legs. Coming afoul of that old man has sort of turned me wrong side out. By the Lord, I must have been dreaming, though. How? But the only way's to stash it. So here goes to hammock again, and in the morning I'll see how this plaguey juggly thinks over by daylight.
Chapter 30, Perak Shloshim, Hamikateret. Kasher histalek Stubb amad achav sha'a kala rachun al hama'aka. V'charka keminhago ba'ed ha'achrona kara lamalach echad min hamishmeret v'shelcho lamata lahavilo et shirafraf hashinhav shelo v'gam et mikatrato. ואת המקטרת הדליק בשלהבתו של הפנס המאיר את תיבת המצפן ואת השרפרף חציב בצד המוגן של הסיפון, וכך ישב לו וישן. בימי הנרווגים הקדמוניים, המסורת אומרת, היו המלכים הדניים שוחרי הים עושים את כיסאות מלכותם נבעים של לוויתן חד שן. איך איפה יכול היה אדם להביט אז באחאב, היושב על אותה חצובה של עצמות, בלי שתעלה בדעתו המלכות שאותה זו מסמלת? שכן חיין של הסיפונים ומלכו של ים ומושל גדול בלוויתנים היה אחאב. רגעים אחדים עלה הקיטור הסמיך מפיהו במשאבים מהירים ומתמידים, ששבו וטפחו על פניו, על שום מה. אמר לבסוף לנפשו בהוציאו את השפופרת מפיו, שוב אין העישון הזה מרגיע הו מקטרתי. ודאי רב סבלי עם שר כסמך, הנה עמלתי וטרחתי והנאה לא הפקעתי. ולא עוד אלא כל הזמן עישנתי בבלי דעת לעבור הרוח. לעבור הרוח ובשאיפות עצבניות כאילו משל, כאילו בדומן ללוויתן הגבוה. קילוחי האחרונים הם העזים ביותר וידועי הרוגז ביותר. מה לי ולמקטרת הזאת? הרי לשלוות רוח היא יעודנה להעלות עדים לבנים ורחים בין שערות שבעת רכות, לא בין טלטלים אפורים כברזל, כגון אלה שלי, לא אעשן עוד. הוא זרק את המקטרת אל הים בעודה מהבהבת, האש צפצפה בגלים. בו ברגע חלפה הספינה ליד הבוע, ושהלתה המקטרת בציל לידתה. על הסיפון התהלך אחאב כמתנודד אנה ואנה, כובעו משולשל על מצחו.
When Stubb had departed, Ahab stood up for a while, leaning over the bulwarks, and then, as had been usual with him of late, calling a sailor of the watch, he sent him below for his ivory stool and also his pipe. Lighting the pipe at the binnacle lamp and planting the stool on the weather side of the deck, he sat and smoked. In old Norse times, the thrones of the sea-loving Danish kings were fabricated, saith tradition, of the tusks of the narwhal. How could one look at Ahab then seated on that tripod of bones without bethinking him of the royalty that it symbolized? For a Khan of the plank and a king of the sea and a great lord of Leviathans was Ahab. Some moments passed during which the thick vapor from his mouth in quick and constant puffs, which blew back again into his face. How now, he soliloquized, at last withdrawing the tube. This smoking no longer soothes. O my pipe, hard must it go with me if thy charm be gone. Here have I been unconsciously toiling, not pleasuring, I, and ignorantly smoking to windward all the while, to windward, and with such nervous whiffs, as if, like the dying whale, my final jets were the strongest and fullest of trouble. What business have I with this pipe? This thing that is meant for sereneness, to send up mild white vapors among mild white hairs, not among torn iron gray locks like mine, I'll smoke no more. He tossed the still lighted pipe into the sea. The fire hissed on the waves. The same instant the ship shot by the bubble the sinking pipe made. With slouched hat, Ahab lurchingly paced the planks.
Okay, chapter 31. So I'll start. I'm pick up chapter 3. למחרת בבוקר נטפל סתיו על פלסק. חלום משונה שכזה בחורי, לא חלמתי מעודי, יודע אתה את רגל השיניו של הזקן, ובכן בחלומי ועט בי ברגלו זו. וכאשר ניסיתי להשיב לו ואיתה, חי נפשי איש קטן שלי, שמטתי את רגלי כליל. ואחר כך, כהרף עין, היה אחאב כפרמידה. ואני, חמורתיים שכמוני, הוספתי לבעוט בה. אבל הדבר שהיה מוזר עוד יותר, פלסק, אתה יודע כמה מוזרים כל החלומות בתוך כל החימה הזאת שהייתי שרוי בה, דימיתי להרהר משום מה שאחרי הכל אין זה עלבון כבד כל כך, אותה ואיתה מרגלו של אחז. וכי מה? חושב אני, מה קרה? אין זה רגל אמיתית, רק רגל תותבת. ויש הבדל עצום בין חבטה חיה לחבטה מתה. משום כך, מכת יד פלסק כשר לשעתה פי 50 ממכת מקל. העבר החי ממנו העלבון החי, איש קטן שלי. וכל אותה שעה אני מהרהר ביני לביני, שים לב. בעוד אני תוקע את חרטומי נעלי המטופשים באותה פרמידה ארורה, כל הזמן היה הדבר כולו מבלבל כל כך. אומר אני, ובכן, מהרהר הייתי ביני לביני. הנה מה הרגל הזאת שלו, אם לא מקל של עצם לוויתן. כן, אני חושב, הייתה זו רק חבטה של משובה לאמיתו של דבר. רק בעצם לוויתן כיבד אותי, לא בעיטה גסה. זאת ועוד חשוב אני לי. הבית בא פעם, והרי הקצה שלה, החלק של כף הרגל, כמה הוא קטן. אילו ועט בי איכר רחב כפות, זה היה עלבון אחד אפיים. אבל העלבון הזה מצטמצם בנקודה אחת בלבד. אלא שעכשיו באה הבדיחה הגדולה ביותר שבחלום. פלסק, בשעה שהייתי ממטיר בעיטות על הפרמידה, בא מין איש ים זקן ששערותיו כשל גירית וחטוטרת על גבו, והוא אוחז בי בכתפי ומסובב אותי אליו. מה רצונך? אומר הוא. לעזאזל, בן אדם, כמה פחדתי איזה פרצוף. אך כעבור רגע, כמו התגברתי על הפחד. מה רצוני? אומר אני לבסוף, ומה זה עסקך? רוצה הייתי לדעת, אדוני הגיבן, כלום אתה רוצה לספוג בעיטה? חי אלוהים פלסק, אני רק אמרתי זאת והוא הסב אליי את אחוריו. התכופף והעלה שפע של עצות ששימשו לו לבוש, וכי מה ראיתי לדעתך? חזיז ורעם. בן אדם, אחוריו היו מלאים דקרים שחודים מופנים החוצה. אומר אני לאחר שנמלכתי בדעתי, חזקה עלי שלא אבעט בך קשיש סטאב החכם, אמר הוא סטאב החכם, וכך היה ממלמל כל אותה שעה כאילו לא אס את חניכיו כמכשפה של ערובה. משראיתי כי לא יחדל מלחזור ולומר סטאב החכם, חשבתי שמוטב לי כבר לחזור ולבעוט בפרמידה. אבל אך הרימותי רגלי לשם כך, והוא נתן בקולו, חדל מן הבעיטות האלו אומר אני, מה העניין עכשיו, קשישי? אדרבה, אומר הוא, הבן נידון בעלבון, הקברניט אחאב בעט בך, לא כן? כן, הוא בועט בי. אומר אני בדיוק כאן בעט, טוב ויפה אומר הוא. ברגל השיניו שלו בעט לא כן? אמנם כן, אומר אני, אם כן יפה אומר הוא. סטאב החכם, וכי על מה אתה מתלונן? וכי לא ועת במלוא הרצון הטוב? לא ברגל אורן פשוטה ושחורה ועת נכון? לא איש גדול בעט בך וברגל שנהב יפה ועת. סטאב, כבוד הוא זה. ראה בכך דבר של כיבוד. הסקת ושמה סטאב החכם. באנגליה הישנה הלורדים הגדולים ביותר רואים בכך גדולה לעצמם כאשר מלכה סותרת להם על הלחי ומכתירה אותם בתואר אבירי הבירית. אבל אתה התפאר לך סטאב, שאחז הזקן בעט בך ועשה אותך איש חכם. זכור את דברי, הנח לו לבעוט בך ותהיינה בעיתותיו כיבודים בעיניך, ובשום פנים ואופן אל תחזר בעיתה, שכן ממילא לא תוכל. סטאב החכם, וכי אינך רואה את הפרמידה ההיא, ודברים האלה דומה היה לפתע פתאום, כאילו משום מה, באיזו צורה משונה. שט התעופף לו באוויר, אני נחרתי והתהפכתי על צדי, והנה אני וערסלי. ובכן, מה דעתך על החלום הזה, פלסק? אינני יודע, אך נדמה לי שהוא מתופס קצת. יכול להיות. אך הוא אשני איש חכם פלסק, רואה אתה את אחאב עומד לו שם. מביט מעבר לירכתיים, כי כן אין טוב לך פלסק, מאשר להניח אותו זקן לנפשו. לעולם אל תדבר אליו בכעס, ויאמר מה שיאמר, הלו, מה זה הוא צועק? הסקת ושמה. ראשי התרנים שם, שימו לב כולכם, יש לוויתנים בסביבה, אם תראו לוויתן לבן, צעקו עד שתפקנה ראותכם. מה דעתך על זה עכשיו, פלסק? וכי אין בזה משהו משונה קצת? לוויתן לבן, אתה שמת לב, ובן אדם? הבט וראה, יש משהו מיוחד ברוח, היכון פלסק, מחשבת דמים נושא אחאב בחובו, אבל הס הוא פונה לבוא הנה.
Chapter 31, Queen Mab. Next morning, Stubb accosted Flask. Such a queer dream, King Post, I never had. You know the old man's ivory leg? Well, I dreamed he kicked me with it, and when I tried to kick back upon my soul, my little man, I kicked my leg right off. And then presto, Ahab seemed a pyramid, and I like a blazing foot kicking at it. But what was still more curious, Flask, you know how curious all dreams are? Through all this rage that I was in, I somehow seemed to be thinking to myself that after all, it was not much of an insult, that kick from Ahab. Why, thinks I, what's the row? It's not a real leg, only a false one. And there's mighty difference between a living thump and a dead thump. That's what makes a blow from the hand, Flask 50 times more savage to bear than a blow from a cane. The living member that makes the living insult, my little man. And thinks I to myself all the while, mind, while I was stubbing my silly toes against a cursed pyramid, so confoundedly contradictory was it all the while, I say, I was thinking to myself, what's his leg now but a cane, a whalebone cane? Yes, thinks I, it was only a playful cudgeling, in fact, only a whaleboning that he gave me, not a base kick. Besides, thinks I, look at it once, why, the end of it, the foot part, what a small sort of end it is. Whereas if a broad-footed farmer kicked me, there's a devilish broad insult. But this insult is whittled down to a point only. But now comes the greatest joke of the dream, Flask. While I was battering away at the pyramid, a sort of badger-haired old merman with a hump on his back takes me by the shoulders and slews me around. "What are you about?" says the slid man. But I was frightened. Such a fizz. But somehow next moment I was over the fright. "What am I about?" says I at last. "And what business is it that of yours I should like to know? Mr. Humpback, do you want a kick?" By the Lord, Flask, I had no sooner said that than he turned round his stern to me, bent over, and dragging up a lot of seaweed he had up for a clout, what do you think I saw? Why, thunder alive, man, his stern was stuck full of marlin spikes, with the points out. Say I, on second thought, I guess I won't kick you, old fellow. "Wise Stubb," said he, "wise Stubb," and kept muttering it all the time, a sort of eating of his gums like a chimney hag. Seeing he wasn't going to stop saying over this wise Stubb, I thought I might as well fall to kicking the pyramid again. But I had only just lifted my foot for it when he roared out, "Stop that kicking." "Helloa," says I, "what's the matter now, old fellow?" "Look ye here," says he, "let's argue the insult. Captain Ahab kicked ye, didn't he?" "Yes, he did," say I. "Right here it was." "Very good," says he. "He used his ivory leg, didn't he?" "Yes, he did," says I. "Well, then," says he, "wise Stubb, what have you to complain of? Didn't he kick with right good will? It wasn't a common pitch pine leg he kicked with, was it? No, you were kicked by a great man and with a beautiful ivory leg. Stubb, it's an honor. I consider it an honor. Listen, wise Stubb, in old England, the greatest lords think it's great glory to be slapped by a queen and made garter knights of. But be your boast, Stubb, that ye were kicked by old Ahab and made a wise man of. Remember what I say. Be kicked by him, account his kicks honors, and no one account kicks back. If you can't help yourself, wise Stubb, don't you see that pyramid? With that, he's all of a sudden seemed somehow in some queer fashion to swim off into the air. I snored, rolled over, and there I was in my hammock. Now, what do you think of that dream, Flask? I don't know. It seems a sort of foolish to me, though. Maybe, but it's made a wise man of me, Flask. Do you see Ahab standing there sideways looking over the stern? Well, the best thing you can do, Flask, is let the old man alone. Never speak to him whenever he says helloa. What's that he shouts, hark? Masthead there, look sharp, all of ye. There are a whale hereabout. If you see a whale, a white one, split your lungs for him. What do you think of that now, Flask? Ain't there a small drop of something queer about that, eh? A white whale? Do you mark that, ma'am? Look ye, there's something special in the wind. Stand by for it, Flask. Ahab has that booty on his mind, but mum, he comes this way.